Good evening, ladies.
Kavod Haraf, how are you?
Thank God.
Oh, Hashem.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're about to finish the chapter here, a little bit left over. The Ramban Katab, it says like this, right? The Ramban wrote, Mistaba de Gemara Didan, that it says our Talmud, right, is probably lo Sharia, doesn't allow this. Ela lefrushe misura, unless you're doing it in order to save somebody from sin, right? We talked about this yesterday. What are we talking about? Just to remind you that you're in the bathroom, a couple of people in there, right? And they want to talk about the laws of the bathroom, halachot. So the question is, are you allowed to ask these questions in the bathroom? So we saw one opinion that says, yes, you're allowed to. And now we see here the Ramban says not so. He disagrees with that. So what is he saying? He says the only way you can do this is in order to save somebody from sinning. So if he's about to do a sin, and you see him, you should tell him, oh no, you can't do that. Don't do that over here. But otherwise, says the Ramban, you should not do that. Ela lefrusha misra. Umar said that Rabbi Meir love. So that's what he says, right? And then we go on. K'shiachazor pasak arif chozer limkom. Right. So then we talked about the issue of when he goes back to read. What does he read? Where does he start from? Where he left off, or he start from beginning? So we said, according to the Rif, you're supposed to go back to where you left off. And then we saw the Re argues with this and says, no, you should go back to the beginning. But when is that? Only if you waited long enough to finish the whole thing. Then you should go back to the beginning. That's what he says. So it says about this, Bet Yosef, we already explained this in chapter 65. Okay, so we'll see the Shulchan Aruch and we're done with this chapter. And we're getting close to the end of the laws of Kriyat Shema altogether. So, yeah. Let's see what's in the Shulchan Aruch. See here. No, not this one. This one, okay. So it says here in the Shulchan Aruch, "Afilu leharher b'divrei Torah asur bet hakiseh bet hamerchatz." So he says, "Umakom atinofet." So he says, when it comes to even thinking about words of Torah, you're not allowed to do that in the bathroom or in a bathhouse or in a place which is filthy there, right? So the question is, right, what is a filthy place? So he says, we're talking about a place which has excrement or urine there, right? Not allowed to do any of these things there. So think about Divrei Torah. Says the Rama, so he says you can't even learn the laws of the bathhouse there, right? As we said, that's the opinion of the Ramban. So the Rama here, Paskins like the Ramban that we saw in the Bet Yosef, right? But the question is, does the Shulchan Aruch agree with that? We'll see. Devarim shel chol mutar leomram sham. So now he brings, right, what we saw in the name of the Rambam there in the Bet Yosef, that he says things which are mundane, you're allowed to say them in the bathroom, b'lashon hakodesh, right? Even in Hebrew. So even though you're talking in Hebrew like they do today, right, in Israel, they're talking Hebrew, but you know, if you talk things which are mundane, even though you're talking Hebrew, it's okay. What's the chidush over there, right? What's the novel idea there? The novel idea is that you may think that, you know, when it comes to the holy tongue, you can't even say mundane things because the essence of the holy tongue itself is holy. So, you know, you may think that's also forbidden. Comes the Rambam and says, no, that's not forbidden. Right? So then it goes on, right? So it's also the attributes of God, right? Like merciful and faithful. You're allowed to say them there, right? By the way, the question would be, what about, right, like in English, you know, to say God? So is that like the real name of God or just an attribute or nickname or whatever, right? It's definitely not the real name of God, you know? So therefore, the truth is that there's no prohibition, you know, to this word. Even to erase it, by the way, there's no prohibition. Even though a lot of people, you know, write word God with that little, that little line in the middle, instead of using the word O, there's no reason for that. There's no, it's not necessary to do that. The reason why they're doing it is because you may come to erase it, whatever, all kinds of stringencies that we never heard of before. So there's no reason to write God, you know, with that, right? What do you want to call, whatever they call that thing, right? So you can just write it with an O, like the normal way. There's no reason to do that. So it tells you, right, then which names of God are forbidden to say in the bathrooms. The ones that can't be erased, right? Hashemot she'enam nimchakim, asur, le'azkiram sham. You're not allowed to mention them there. Okay, so let me just see what the Mishnah Berurah says here. Interesting to see what he brings here about this. Not this one. Nothing really there. Let's see this one. Let's see these. Okay, here he brings another opinion. Let's see. Aleph. Okay, let's talk about some other stuff. But anyway, let's see what else we got here. Okay, whatever it is. Anyway, so he goes on to say Shulchan Aruch. So he says, but if there is a situation where, you know, somebody is doing something forbidden there, so you're allowed to tell him the halacha in order to stop him, to prevent him from doing it. Even in Hebrew, right? As we said, no problem. ubinyane kodesh, and also when it comes to even halacha, right? Things like that. Okay, so you see from here, by the way, the language of the Shulchan Aruch, that he seems to agree, paskin like the Ramban that we saw in the Beit Yosef, and also that the Ramah brings it here as well. That what? That you can't really talk the laws of the bathroom in the bathroom unless you're doing it in order to save somebody from sinning. So meaning what? You're going to rebuke him, and tell him, no, don't do that. It's not allowed to do that in the bathroom. Something like that. So he says in the Ramah, he says like this. So he says the rule is like this: wherever it's permitted to think about words of Torah, mutar lifsok din. He says also you can paskin the din. But he says you're not allowed to say the reasons, right? That's funny. I'll tell you why I'm laughing. But anyway, right, the point is like this. He's saying here, the Ramah, interesting, right? That if you're allowed to think about words of Torah in this particular place, right? As we said, right? For instance, let's say it's your home shower, right? With no toilet there, whatever, right? So, it's clean. So, okay, we said over there, you can think about words of Torah. But, so the Ramah says, if that's the case, you can also paskin halacha. What does that mean? If somebody asks you, is this allowed or not allowed, right? Can you tell me, Rabbi? So you tell him, yeah, not allowed to do that, sorry. But says the Ramah, you can't give the reason for it, right? So why would it be, by the way, you can't give the reason? Anybody know what the... Okay. So...
I'm sorry. Is it because he might name a source from the actual Torah in that moment that he's giving the explanation?
Right, it's true what you're saying, but so also the psak halacha itself is also from the Torah. You know what I mean? So why is that any more Torah than this? That's the question. You know what I mean?
Well, you're actually mentioning the source, the words of Torah, no?
Yeah, but the law is also the Torah. You know what I mean? So then what's the difference between the law itself and the source of the law? In other words, what he's telling you is you can tell him Shulchan Aruch, but don't tell him Beit Yosef. That's what he's saying. Why is that? What's the reason for that? So the reason is like this, because he doesn't need to know right now the source, all he needs to know is if it's allowed or not. So therefore, you can only say whatever you need, like whatever is a need right now. But further than that, right, we tell you, listen, are you sure you want to ask me this question in the bathhouse over here? Like, let's go somewhere else, we'll talk about it somewhere else. Like, this is not the venue, to asking me now to teach you Bet Yosef in my shower. You know what I mean? That's not the place for it. So that's the reason why. That's the thing, But the law itself, he needs to know why, because he wants to know if it's allowed to do or not. Maybe his question is, relevant right now. This is the reason why we're not allowed to give the reasons, because it's not necessary to do that. It's like the icing on the cake, It's not the cake itself. It's something else.
And Kavod Harav, in that, in effect, would be fulfilling what the Ramah is saying, right? That you're allowed to say those words, that halakha to save him from sin, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What was that again?
Okay, so in essence, it's fulfilling what the Ramah is saying, that you're allowed, is it the Ramah, I think, that you're allowed to say the words in order to save him from sin in the bathroom. Or is it the Ramah?
We said a couple of things here, right? Which is, you can, just as we said, right, to rebuke him, to save him from sin. That's one thing, which was written in the Shulchan Aruch. But then the Ramah added one more thing, he said that also, even though you're not rebuking him, but he asked you a question. You know what I mean? Even that you're allowed to answer him. But we're not talking about the same thing here, because the Shulchan Aruch is talking about a public bathhouse, right? Which is, you're not allowed to think the words of Torah there.
And the Ramban.
And the Ramah is talking here about a place where you're allowed to think about words of Torah.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking like a private shower, let's say, right? That's something else. So really, the truth is they're talking about two different situations.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you.
I mean,
thank you.
So yeah, so you know, there's something funny about this. You should know, by the way. Why did I laugh? Because sometimes, a lot of people ask me questions in halacha. It's not enough for them to like give them the answer. You know what I mean? They also want to know the sources. You know what I mean? Yeah, Rabbi, what's the sources for that? Like sometimes, it's very annoying when people ask this question. You know why? Because sometimes I don't have the time. I'm busy with something else. Like I don't. And also sometimes you got to look it up and it takes time. So like so that's going to be my excuse from now on. I'm going to say, well, I can't tell you the sources. I'm in the shower now. That's what I'll tell them. They won't ask me for sources anymore. Okay. All right. So next time you hear me tell me I'm in the shower, you know why I said that. You understand why? Okay. I'm joking. So we're done with that, and we're going now to the next chapter, right? Which is 86. Okay, Vav. Okay, so we're almost finished with the glows of Shema. So it says in the Tur, Harochetz b'mayim sruchim or b'mei mishra, right? So here he's talking about something a little bit different, right? He's bathing here in water which is like bad smelling water, right? Or water which is used for soaking, right? So what is the soaking business? In those days, what they did was, they used to soak flax in water, and the flax would give it like a bad smell, the water. So in cases like that, right, where it's a very bad smell coming from the water, right? So he says showing by pishtan or cannabis or even cannabis, right? Right, which sounds like cannabis. You know what's cannabis, right? Okay, whatever. There's also canvas, right? Probably that's what it is. Not cannabis, the stuff that they smoke. It's canvas. By the way, is that the same thing? Is that the same plant? I'm not really sure. They make canvas from. I'm not really sure. Anyway. So anyway, that's what he's talking about here, right? He's talking about the plant that you make canvas from. Whatever. Right? So they used to soak that too. Right? So he says in the Tur, if you have like filthy water like that, which is bad smelling, you shouldn't cover yourself with that water. Meaning what? Immerse in there and read Kriyat Shema, right? Not only that, he says, but you can't even read when you're like next to it. Just like excrement. So meaning what? That water smells really bad. It's like it's horrible. So he says, so he says you gotta go away from it until you can't see it. And if it's behind you 4 amot, like we said with the excrement, makom shekala areach, when the smell ends. Okay, that's the end of the Tur. Very short chapter. Says in the Bet Yosef. not this one. Yeah, so it says in the bit you said. Where's the source for this? Also on Brachot, Chabed Amud Bet, Tanan, we learned over there in the Mishnah, Loid Kaseh b'mayim hara'im. You shouldn't cover yourself with bad water, which meaning smelly water. V'lo b'mei mishra, and also the soaking water, ad she'atil netochan mayim, until you add some water to it, right? So meaning what? Adding water will also dilute it. This way it won't smell bad. How much you have to distance yourself from that stuff? And from the excrement, 4 amot. That's what it says in the Mishnah. When it goes on, over Gemara, it says in the Gemara, V'kama maya rame. So he asked the question to the Gemara, right? How much water do you have to add to it? The azil. So in other words, there's no end to it, right? Like you're gonna have to bring like a whole big, backpack, of water, whatever to add to it. God knows how much you have to bring, right? Whole barrel there. So in other words, he's telling you it's not practical, like give me a better solution. It's not a practical solution. This is what he means to say. You shouldn't do it at all, right? In other words, adding water is not really a plausible solution because it's going to take you a lot of water for that. So he says, what about urine? Right, so there you can add water, right? As we said, that you can do, because the urine is usually a small amount; it's not a large amount. Rashi explains, "Maim hara'im." What does that mean? Bad water, right? Sruchim, it means it's smelly. Umashman leRabbeinu dechi katane, so implies to Rabbeinu the Torah. And when it teaches kama yarchik mehem, how much you have to distance yourself from it. Ka'e amaim hara'im, it's talking about bad water. Umemishra, and also the soaking water. Umeraglaim, and also the urine. Ve'eshti tmua. So he says, there's a wonder, on the Rambam, he says, he didn't mention these rules in the laws of Kiryat Shema about the water, about the bad water, the smelly water. He didn't mention all that stuff. So what happened? The Rambam forgot about it? What happened? So it seems to me, he says that he's explaining so it seems that the Rambam says, he holds that when the Gemara says how much you have to distance yourself, he asks how much you have to distance yourself from it. He's only referring to the urine, not to the other stuff. Bilvad. It says also, that's the way it seems from the Perush of the Mishnah of the Rambam. He says, however, according to that which I wrote in chapter 79, right? The Efshar, the Bichlal Divrei Rambam, that perhaps that the Rambam's words also are meant to include also the what do you call it, the rotting core, right? The rotting meat, the flesh, right? The core, we call it, of the animal. It's the same thing also probably applies to the bad water. So in other words, the reason why he didn't write the bad water is because it's included in this issue of the of the smelly meat, carcass, right? Carcass, whatever. And also soaking water. So the Beit Yosef says that's probably why he didn't include it, because he already, in other words, he wants you to compare one thing to the other. It's obvious, like sometimes you have to add 1 + 2 and make 3, Yeah, thank you, good. Congratulations, you know how to count to 3? 1 + 2? Okay, right? So the same thing in halakha, Sometimes a person is required to use his brains to say 1 + 2 = 3. Same thing. Okay, so that's the end of the Bet Yosef. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. Says Shulchan Aruch, Maim Seruchim o me mishra. Right, so we have all this dirty water, right? Soaking water. Sheshorim b'hem pishtanu kanavus. They soak in there the flax and the canvas, whatever. Tzarich li'archik mehem. You have to distance yourself from that. Kemo minatzoa, just like excrement, right? So same rule. Okay, that's pretty clear, I guess, right? I'm going to go on unless you have any questions. So we'll go to the next chapter, which is Pei Zayin. We're almost finished. Only 2 more chapters. Pei Zayin. So it says here, the Torah says, so, right, what is he talking about here? We're talking about those canisters, right, which are used for urination and stuff. Right? It says they're like the same thing as excrement itself. Right? So you got, therefore, in lefanav, in front of it, you got to distance yourself until you can't see it. And behind it, 4 amot. From the place where the smell ceases. Even if they have nothing inside of them, right? They're empty. Doesn't matter. And even if he urinated in there, doesn't really help. Doesn't help. But dafka imhen shel cheres or shel etz. Look what he says, right? That only applies if they're made out of clay, earthenware, or etz, right, or wood. Why is that? Shenivla betocho, all right, because there, what happens is that the excrement or the urine gets absorbed in there, because these are porous elements. And they're full of smell there. About imhen shel zchuchit. If it's made out of glass, that's a different story, right? Or shel cheres metzupin, or coated earthenware, right? Be'avar, which is coated with lead. Or kli matechet, or let's say it's made out of metal, right? Mutar, it's allowed, right? So, in other words, if you have any substance which doesn't absorb the taste and the smell, then it's okay. The truth is, that when I learned this halakha a while ago, I was thinking to myself, then, our toilets should be okay because it's coated, Our toilets are coated with something, right? There's that glaze that they have on the outside. So the truth is, I saw, that the Rabbi, Maran Shalom, my rabbi, he writes about this and he says, but he doesn't really hold by this coating there with these toilets. I don't know, for some reason, I don't remember what he writes there, but he says that maybe it's not really a good coating or whatever, so he doesn't really accept that with our toilets. So therefore he says, right, that our toilets don't have this rule of being something which doesn't absorb. Interesting, but getting back to what we were talking a couple of days ago, here's the thing, right, that we talked about this issue of the jails, right? And then Shoshana said that the seats in the jails don't have covers. She even sent me a picture of it, so yeah, I got to see a picture of it. Very, very exciting to see that picture. But anyway, right, the point is that even if you don't have a cover, this could be possibly another solution, which is that if the toilet is made out of something which is glazed or it's made out of metal, right? And by the way, I'm not 100% sure, but that picture that she sent me, it could be that it looks like the toilet was metal. Maybe they make it out of metal because in the jails they need to be more tougher, whatever. They take more punishment there. Whatever it is, I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. But anyway, the point is like this, right? even if you say that it's not metal, but it's like glazed, clay, earthenware, right? Still, it should be something which doesn't absorb. So therefore, even though the rabbi told us, right, that he wrote that he doesn't really want to rely on that, but the truth is, when you're in jail, you have to take like the lenient aside there, So therefore, it seems to me that's another reason why in jail a person could say a blessing, in his cell there, he has to bless on something, whatever, because you can combine all these reasons. One of them is you can cover it with something with your jacket. Number two, it's glazed or whatever, or it's metal, so it doesn't really absorb. So with a combination of these things, it seems like you can get away with it, when you have no choice. That's what I'm saying, because really in jail, sometimes you don't have any choice. They do let you out, like for prayers, maybe for this or whatever, but you're making blessings all day there. So, whatever. So that's the idea, So this is also another thing which I wanted to combine, to the issue of the toilet. But anyway, right, going on, he says that Katav Avi Ezri. So it says that it says in Avi Ezri, Shem Kifa Oal Pip. Oh, another trick, right? Which is he overturned it, right, and stood it upside down. So what does that mean? The opening is covered, right? What about that? Mutar, it's okay, he says. Now it's covered, right? So there you go, right? You see that when you cover it, it's okay. So it says not any worse than the excrement, right, which is behind glass. Same thing, covered. But he says if it's absorbed inside of it, right, it's going to be forbidden anyway. Why? Because as we said, right, that if you have a material which is absorbent, like clay, which is not glazed, or wood, these things are quite porous. So therefore, the smell is going to be there anyway, no matter what. No matter how much you cover it or right, whatever you do to cover the lid, not going to help you. So therefore, right, that's what he's saying here. Interesting. Okay, so we go on a little bit. It says, so it says, okay. So he says, what about if you have this contraption, right, this canister in your house? So here we have a machloket, right, dispute in the Tanaim, right? The Rashba Amar Afilu Bait Shel Me'ah Ama. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? This is not the Rashba of the Rishonim. This is from the Talmud. The Rashba of the Talmud, different guy, right? So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, his name is, right? So he says that one big room, even if it's huge, like a big gymnasium, it's considered like 4 amot, according to his opinion. So therefore, you can't really read there the Kriyat Shema until you take it out. Or you place it under the bed. It's interesting. Okay. Because the bed will cover it, right? It'll be like a cover. So it's considered to be like it's in a different domain. It's under the bed. Interesting. The Rashbag Omer, right? But the Rashbag, right? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he doesn't hold that the whole house is considered to be, the whole room is considered to be 4 amot. So therefore, he says he holds that if it's behind the bed, you can read right away. Because the bed, like interposes, right, between them. So therefore, it's considered to be like in a different domain. In front of the bed. So if it's in front of the bed, then you got to go away from it 4 amot. Rabbanan, the rabbis hold, there's no difference between in front of the bed or the back of the bed. Either way, you have to distance yourself 4 amot. So the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? That he says the whole house is like 4 amot. The Rava pasak de lo kebate. So why don't we paskin like him? Because Rava, he paskin like him, right? He paskin like the Rashbag, right? So therefore we go like Rashbag. And what about the issue of the bed, right? If it interposes, so it says pasak gaon kirashbag. The gaon paskin like Rashbag. Shechotzetzet, that it does interpose. The ha meha debai Rabbi Yosef. Since Rabbi Yosef asked this question, from Ravuna, mita pechuta migimel. He said if a bed is lower than 3 tvachim, kilavudam is considered like closed, like go down to the ground. So he says, "My, what's it din? Amale lo yadana." He says, "I don't know what the halacha is." Right? Asara lo mibaya. So he says regarding 10 tfachim, if it's 10 tfachim, you don't have to ask. The kishuta cherita dame. It's considered like a different domain. Amar Ravina hilchata pachot migimel kelavud dame. So this rabbi says if it's less than 3, it's considered to be like a lavud. So it's considered to be like it's closed, like down to the ground. Yud reshuta cheriti. If it's 10, it's a different domain. Okay. Bayamine Rav Yosef ben Rav Huna. So this rabbi asked Rav Huna, "V'lo pashit le ulechumra." So he says the truth is that this question wasn't answered, and therefore we go lechumra, we go stringent. V'agaon mefaresh lehach baya liba de Rashbag. So the Gaon says he explains that this question was going according to Rashbag. The pachot migimel ena chotzetzet. Then less than 3 doesn't really interpose. Vadai ubeyud chotzetzet, and 10 does interpose. Migimel the question is only from 3 ad yud until 10. It's that height. Mibaya, that was the question that was asked in the Gemara. And since the question was asked according to him, pasak like him, the ad yud. So therefore, he paskin that if it's until 10, the height doesn't interpose. Umiu lepirush Rashi, but it says according to the Rashi and Raya Misham. There's not really a source from there. Nifsok Rashbag to paskin Rashbag. Shehu Piresh, because he explains Habaya Liba the Rashbag, because he says that the question was going on Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar, not the Rashbag. The Ataka Tamitaka is talking about under the bed. The Pachot Migimel Kelavud Dame, that if it's less than 3, it's considered to be like it's closed. The Chashiv Kim Chuseh, so therefore it's considered to be like it's covered. Lemala, above. Lemala Miyud, if it's above 10, Keluhu B'Rishut Acher, it's a different domain. Therefore, it's not considered to be covered. Under it. But if it's from 3 to 10, this was the question that they asked. According to this, he says, if you learn it this way, under the bed until 3 is okay, because it's lavud, as we said, it's considered like closed. The chashiv kim chuseh, it's considered like covered. That's what it says in Ravad. The afilu Rashbag, even Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar, the machmir, that he's stringent in general, modeh beha. But regarding this, he admits that this is the halacha. Okay, so a little bit confusing, but we'll check the Shulchan Aruch and see. I'm sorry, before we go to Shulchan Aruch, we got to do Bet Yosef. Let's see the Bet Yosef. I read the whole Torah. I probably overdid it, and I should have read it part by part, but whatever is done is done. So we'll go to Bet Yosef. We can come back to and read it again if we need to. Okay, so it says here. He brings a source for this, right? He says, "Besot perk mesh mishemeto." Also the same perk there in Brachot Kafi Amud Bet. Tan Rabbanan, right? The rabbis taught Geref Shel Rei. If you have a right canister which is made for urination, the Avid Shel Miraglain, right? Whether it's urination or defecation, whatever it may be, there's 2 types, right? Asur likrov Kriyat Shema kenegdan. So it says you can't really read Kriyat Shema, as we said, next to it, because they're considered to be like filthy, the smelly. And even though right now it's empty, it's still considered to be smelly. So he says, when it comes to urine itself, you got to add water to it, right? As we said. And since it says regarding urine that you have to add water to it, that it's okay. So it implies that regarding these canisters, adding water doesn't help you. That's what it says. Rabbeinu Yonah, Rashba, Rosh, all these Rishonim. So they said, Katab Rosh. So it says the Rosh, the Tama, the reason, the Chiban, the Meuchadim Lechach. So he says the reason is that since they're made specifically for these things, it's considered like the bathroom itself. Even though they don't have any bad smell. That's what it says in Rambam. Rabbeinu Yonah Katav. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, the Tama de lo mehane behu. So he says the reason why it doesn't help to add water, like we said regarding urine, mishum de dainina lehu kemot so'ah. We judge it like it's excrement. So therefore, it's forbidden from the Torah. From this pasuk, which says, right, your encampment should be holy. As we mentioned, right, that when it comes to urine, the prohibition is only rabbinical. The law asra Torah ela keneged amud bilvad, because the Torah only forbade when he's actually urinating, the process of urination. Hilkach says, therefore, so therefore it's enough just to add water in that case. It seems to me, to give a different reason, it says. The reason when it comes to urine is because the shadow b'netinat mayim, because you can add water. Why? Because they're clear. So therefore the water is able to dilute it, right? And therefore it gets nullified. But when it comes to these canisters, whatever is absorbed in there doesn't mix with the water, right? To become nullified. Hilkach says, therefore, putting water in there doesn't help you. The says, right, the Mordechai nistapek bedin zeh. He had doubt about this, he wasn't sure. He writes, Asur likrot Kriyat Shema keneged ha'oir kenegdan. You can't read Kriyat Shema right next to these things. Because they're designated for that. Even though there's nothing in there. And even if you just add like 3 ounces of water, it could be that doesn't help you that. That's what it says in Tosfot. So there you go, right? They all seem to pretty much agree on that issue.
I have a question.
Sure.
So taking us out of the prison situation, because we agreed that that's an unusual case where, people are maybe not, I don't know, not the frumest of people anyway in the first place. So, they maybe if they're going to be doing tshuva, they'll just do what they can. What about in like a hospital? Obviously these rules are, I guess they were created at a time when we were using chamber pots and things of that nature and not indoor plumbing. But in a hospital where there's bedpans or there's urinals or even someone who has like an ostomy bag, like, is it better for the person not to say Kriyat Shema because they're ill, or is it better for them to just do what they can, or what would be the?
So are you talking about the case where they're wearing these things, or what? What's the story?
Well, either wearing them, or they've used the bedpan, or their roommate has used a bedpan, and there's either urine or.
So we would have to follow these guidelines, according to what it says here.
Okay.
And plug it into the new situation.
Right, but I mean, what if the sick person doesn't really have any control over when the nurse comes to clean up?
Yeah.
Is it better for them not to say?
That's true, yeah. So then, so what? Are you telling me like he's drenched in urine, the guy? What?
Drenched in urine, just, I don't know, the guy's used the urinal, or his suite mate has used the bedpan. And
Right.
it's
So I mean, there are solutions for these things, you know. You
the
could
nurse-
just like, you know, take the urinal and put it into the bathroom. You know,
okay, but
that's- you're good, right?
sometimes people in the hospital don't have that option. They can't get out of bed.
No, I'm saying the nurse can do that, right?
Right, the nurse could do that, but I mean, if the person wants to go to sleep, they should just not say Kriyat Shema, they just,
So
Give
as
it
we said, right, if it's made out of metal, you're okay.
okay. In the hospitals, they're not usually made out of metal, they're plastic.
What are they made out of?
Plastic.
Plastic. Oh, plastic.
I feel like I've become your authority on what toilets are
Right.
made.
I hate to tell you, right? I hate to break the news to you, but the Beit Yosef, he doesn't talk about plastic. Because in
course.
those days they didn't have plastic, you know what I mean?
So I mean,
So
my
then
question is,
how do we plug that in into
So
our
he-
situation?
he should try his best to get the nurse to clean it up or cover it or remove it or whatever, but what if he does not have that option?
Yeah.
Or whatever, long-term care.
The
or
truth is that my humble guess is that plastic will not smell. It's just like metal.
Okay, but even if there's a smell there, okay, or something like that, the person you would advise them not to say Kriyat Shema until,
If there is a smell there, he's not allowed to say. That's for sure. Yeah, there's no question. about it.
okay, even if he has no control.
Yeah, even if it doesn't come from him, it could come from somebody else. Doesn't really matter, you know.
I mean, if he can't resolve the situation, he just doesn't say Kriyat Shema.
He should wait, you know, until the situation clears up.
I see, okay.
As
No
they
problem.
say, right? But you know, I want to tell you, by the way, something interesting. You know that in Israel, you know, they have several jails there. Okay, so I don't know exactly, by the way, what the situation is over there. If they cover the toilets or not, this I don't know. I'm not really sure, but I can tell you one thing. You know that there are jails which are made for religious people over there. I mean, meaning what? That many of the people who are jailed there are like observant, you know, Orthodox Jews. And I know, by the way, people who have been in jail who are Orthodox Jews. So in Israel, this is very common. This is a Jewish country, you understand? So there's always going to be Orthodox Jews in jail.
The question becomes,
Yeah.
what is in jail if there's such pious Jews?
Oh boy, that's a good one. Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. Okay, so the answer is, you know, that I'll tell you something interesting. Okay, we could talk about this, by the way, for a couple of minutes, and you know, really get home in on this issue. Okay, what happens is like this. Okay, when the Jewish country began, right? You know, before that we didn't have a country, right, for 2,000 years. So we never knew what it was like to have like a country, all Jews, you know, more or less. You know what I mean? So we didn't understand Jewish nature so much at that time. You know what it is to have a country together. But now that we do have a country, and especially it's not really a religious country per se. You know what I mean? The government is not religious per se. So what was discovered, you know, what we've discovered is that a lot of people, you know, who are Orthodox Jews, religious, they have a criminal element in them. You know, they're criminals, they're thieves. You know, some of them actually kill people also. You know, there's a rage of anger, you know, sometimes a person has. He can be an Orthodox Jew, but when he comes to that rage, you know, he's liable to kill somebody. You know what I mean? So in Israel, you know, that shul that jail which I'm talking about, it's called Kele Masyahu. That's the name, Masyahu, right? It's the name of the jail. They have a special, you know, ward there for Orthodox Jews. They have a synagogue there. They have all kinds of facilities, you know, minyanim, all kinds of things. You know, so it's totally built on that standard. Not only that, listen to this now, okay? In that jail, they have a bet midrash, you know, like a study hall there. So you can go in there, you know, and while you're in jail, become a Torah scholar because they have books there, you know, Yalkut Yosef. They have everything. You can go and read there and, you know, become.
It seems to me if you miss out on your 100 blessings, or you can't say share
Yeah.
sorry because you got a roommate that poops all the time. I mean, maybe you should think about what landed you in jail in the first place. And like,
well, that's a different story, right? The truth is, that Rabbi Yosef, right, the chief rabbi, who's the chief rabbi now, he personally told me, that in his younger days, he used to, even until this day, he goes to jail to give lectures there, he lectures in jail. So there are people who get Torah lectures over there. They have rabbis coming in to lecture there. Because it's part of the rehabilitation, learning Torah, being a moral person, all these good things, right? I'll tell you another story, okay? Interesting. This is something that I went through myself personally, that when I was younger, in my younger days, I had a friend, right, who was an Ashkenazi rabbi. And I'm not going to mention his name. I don't want to embarrass anybody. Okay. This rabbi lives in Brooklyn until this day. But I met him in Israel. Okay. And he's like super Orthodox Haredi, whatever. And he's known to be a Kabbalist also. Like quote unquote, right? You got to be careful when you hear that word, a Kabbalist. You never know what you're getting over there. But right, this guy was in jail. He did some white collar crimes. There was some issues, with some kind of gray market issues, whatever, not paying taxes, this, that, right? So he landed in jail. So here's the thing, right? If you go to a state, like Virginia, right, or whatever, in the South, whatever, there's not a lot of obviously Orthodox Jews in jail, but in New York State, there's plenty of Orthodox Jews in jail. Hasidic, everything. They have special programs for them. Once a week, this rabbi told me when he was in the jail, they took him to the mikveh every Friday. This was a part of the program. They get a mikveh, they get black kosher food, the whole with all the trimmings, everything. They probably even get gefilte fish on Shabbat. So whatever it is, right? So the truth is, there are some areas which the truth is there are very many Hasidic people in jail. And I'll tell you something interesting, that my uncle, I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm not going to tell you his name, but he was in jail recently. And there's a special jail upstate New York, where they have like white collar criminals there. It's like more like a luxury jail. This is where Michael Cohen was, the famous Michael Cohen. He was there. He saw him there. So what do you call it? He said that there's plenty of Hasidic people over there. So these people they're not, murderers and killers. Like they're just white collar criminals. All kinds of tax evasion, things like this. They wind up in jail. I mean? This is what happens. So we live in a very crazy world. You never know what's going on today. It is what it is. I wanted to tell you just from my experience, things that I've seen. Right. Also, Aryeh Deri, who was a minister in the jail. He was a rabbi. He was in jail for like 3 years in Israel. He was in that jail that I told you about, right? So he was there. He ordered, glatt kosher food and all that. They give you everything you want. Just you can't walk around too much. That's the only thing. You got to stay on the premises, right? That's the only thing. Otherwise, life is not too bad over there. We shouldn't see from it, right? We shouldn't see from that. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to get too much into this stuff. But I can't tell you, I've seen a lot of things in my life. I've been around the block a little bit. So anyway, right, going back to what we said. So Mash Katav Lefanav Melo Enav Ulacharav Arba Amot. So that which we said, right, that when it comes to this contraption, right, this portal, whatever you want to call it, we said in front of it, it's like until you can't see it. In back, it's like 4 amot, just like the excrement itself. So he says, Bet Yosef, what's the source? Sham bebraita, it's right over there. Shetzarich le'archik mehem arba amot. By the way, just reminded me, in the Talmud, you know what it says, right? There's a famous Talmud like this, which is really, mind-blowing, but it's the truth. The Talmud says, most of the thieves are Jewish. So that's what it says. So what, you have to know what that means, right? But what that means is these people who are like professional thieves, if you're in a Jewish area, most of the thieves are Jewish. That's what it says there, the Talmud. So, right, it's not always what you think when it comes to these things. Getting back to what we said, right? שם בברייתא שצריך להרחיק מהם 400, says the ברייתא, right, to go away from 400, ופשוט הוא דכיוון דקצוע דיינינן להו, so it says, it's pashut that we judge it like it's the excrement itself, these portals, whatever they want to call it, right? היינו דווקא באחריו, that's only behind it, right? אבל לפניו כמלוא עיניו, but in front of it, right, until you can't see it. וכן כתוב בספר אוהל מועד, that's what it says also in this book. ומה שכתב, and that which he wrote, בהרחקת אחריו 400 ומקום שכלה הריח, right? When it comes to behind it, it's 400 from the place where the smell ends. הוא על פי מה שנתבאר בראש סימן עין ט', right? This is what we see over there in the סימן, right? This chapter 79. ומה שכתב אם הם של חרס, and that which we wrote, that it only applies when it's made out of clay, right? Or made out of wood, because they're absorbent, they're porous. Rashi explains Sham, to get ve'avit shnehem shel cheres. So it says we're talking about, Rashi says we're talking about earthenware, right? Clay. Because these things are very porous. Katva Tosfot says Tosfot, mashma the perusho implies from his perush about kli de lo balad, but something which doesn't absorb, right? Kegon zchuchit, like glass, for instance. If shad share, it could be that it's allowed. As long as you can put in there, right, some 3 ounces of water, if you have urine in there. That's what it says Mordechai, and also Rashba, Katav. So it says Rashba, so it says that Tosfot had a doubt about this halacha. The hem hekilu, says they were really lenient about this. The dafka bekli cheres, they said only clay is a problem. The bechol Talmud geref shavei hainu cheres, because in all Talmud he says when you have these canisters, right, we're talking about clay. About shel etz, but if it's wood, shel zchuchit or glass, shel minen matachot, or also all types of metals, right? Shara, it's allowed. Ad kan neshano. Ve'arosh katav, and Rosh says the mistaber da be'etz asur. So he says he disagrees a little bit with this, right? Regarding what? Regarding wood, right? So he says no, wood is forbidden. Right? That's the way it seems. The mipnei shehu muvla, because it does absorb. Betocho umaleh zohama, and it's full of. He says it's full of smell there. Aval b'shel zchuchit, but when it comes to glass, mutar, it's allowed. V'kechem divrei Rabbeinu. So that's what Tur says also. So there's regarding the wood, there's a machloket, right? But regarding the other things, it seems like they do agree, more or less. Okay, so he goes on. We're almost finished, right? We'll be done in a second. That what she said, right? If it's made out of clay, metzupin mutar, right? If it's glazed, it's allowed, right? Glazed earthenware. It seems like you learned this from what Rabbeinu Yonah says, B'Shem Rabbanei Tzarfat, right? From the French rabbis. The shir matechet okegon shelanu. So it says if they're made out of metal or like ours, shemitzatan shel zchuchit, some of them are glass, mutar, it's allowed. Mefaresh Rabbeinu the mitzatan shel zchuchit. So it says Rabbeinu says the Tur, some of them are glass, hainu shel cheres. That means they're earthenware, which is glazed, glazed with glass, right? In those days they used to glaze it with glass. Now we glaze it with some other things. Some of it on the outside says hu shel cheres, they're earthenware. Miktsatan shel tzad panim, but the inside of it, hu shel zchuchit, it's like glass in there. Uma she'tzrichu hatasot. That was Tosfot required. The Mordechai le'atil rabit mind to put some water in there, 3 ounces. But shel zchuchit, when it comes to the glass, look at Tavu Parashim. Says the other poskim, the other commentaries didn't write that. The poskim mashma desfilehu, so it implies that they hold the netinat mayim letok geref shel ve'avit, that when you're putting the water inside the right, this canister, whatever, eno ma'alev eno morid, doesn't really help you or hurt you. You don't have to put water in there. There's no reason to put water in there, right? We're talking about a case where there's no urine in there, right? That's what we're talking about. But it says it should be washed well, right, clean. That's what it says in this book. That if he washed this canister with water, right, washed it down well with water. So if it's metal, he says, or glass, mutar, then it's allowed. Even though that's single out for that purpose. But as long as there's no smell. If you Divya Rambam says, according to Rambam, he says, in the Rosh, the medamu gerev ve'avit the beit hakiseh. They say these things are like a bathroom. You have the gam shel zchuchit asur. It would be that probably that even glass is forbidden. Shara beit hakiseh hu, because it's like a bathroom. Umiu efshar lomar, but that you can say that says the chevan the lo balakal. This doesn't absorb at all, and din beit hakiseh alav doesn't really have laws of a bathroom. The chevan the shar poskim parshim katvu leatir. Since all the other poskim says they wrote that it's allowed. Naktinan kevatayu, so we pass like them. He says the atir b'shel matechet to allow at least metal or zchuchit or glass or shel cheres metzupeh or glazed earthenware. Right, that's the way he paskins here in the Bet Yosef. So we'll just see the Shulchan Aruch and we'll stop here. Here. Okay. Okay, so it says like this, right? Gerev shel re'i ve'avit shel miraglaim. Right, if you have we said right, these canisters, whatever, and they're made for excrement and urine. Shel cheres, if it's made out of earthenware or etz or wood, tzarich le'archik mehem kemo mitzvah. You gotta distance yourself like the excrement itself. Afilu itil bahem mayim, even if you put water in there, doesn't help you. Aval im hen shel metachet, if it's made out of metal or shel zchuchit, right, or glass. Or shel cheres, right, or earthenware metzupeh, which is glazed, mutar, you're allowed imhem mechotzim if they're washed well, right? So that, by the way, I think also would apply to plastic as well, because plastic also doesn't smell, doesn't really absorb the smell. Okay, we'll leave that for some other time. Whatever, we'll discuss that. But Bezrat Hashem, God bless you. Thanks for being with us tonight. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Be holy and happy. We'll see you tomorrow. Chazak Baruch.
Kavod. Thank you.
Thank you so much.